All right, welcome to NCSA Live. Thank you guys for joining us again. My name is Kyle Winters. I'm one of the recruiting managers here at NCSA, and today I think we have one of the best topics that we ever get to talk about. We're coming to you live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. If you guys have questions about today's topic or about anything in recruiting, make sure to throw them in the chat. We'll spend some time going through them at the end of the cast here to go over whatever it is you guys are wondering about when it comes to the world of recruiting. I'm joined yet again by one of my favorite people. Phil, I'm certain that the last time we talked about National Signing Day, it was you and me on this last time as well. How are you doing today, Phil?
I'm doing extremely well, Kyle. And I don't know if it was me and you last time around, but I'm super excited this time around. Obviously, super relative as we get into it here with the current date.
Awesome. I appreciate Phil just calling me a lighter right off the bat. So that's a great start, as always. I kind of buried the lead on our topic today, but we are talking about National Signing Day and the NLI. We're going to be going through the buzz around National Signing Day. When is National Signing Day? Surprise, pretty soon. Is the National Letter of Intent NIA mandatory to sign? When signing the NLI, what signing the NLI means? We'll kind of just go through that whole process as it's kind of the culmination of recruiting and what we imagine everybody in this process is working toward. So first and foremost, let's start with Phil, the buzz around National Signing Day. Take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So you think about it, it's a very exciting time. And you think about any student athlete going through the recruiting process. You get that first scholarship offer, it's almost like gold. Okay, it feels really, really exciting, but it's an important thing to note within this natural buzz that comes along with a scholarship offer. Nothing is set in stone until we actually receive our NLI, okay, our National Letter of Intent, and actually make that scholarship offer that was verbal, making it official. Okay, again, our NLI, that National Letter of Intent, it oftentimes is the deal sealer. Okay, it represents for a student athlete all the work that they've put into their recruiting journey, from the academic efforts, the athletic efforts, the countless times between going back and forth in college with college coaches. Once we sign a National Letter of Intent, that is when we feel that overall payoff behind it. And typically, when we look at our National Signing Day, in which we'll talk about here a little bit more, that is actually the time period where we're signing that National Letter of Intent. Okay, a lot of different things around a National Letter of Intent, but when we get a scholarship offer, at some point during the right period, a National Letter of Intent should be following. And once we sign that during the signing period, then we can actually call our recruiting journey successful. Then we can bring our recruiting journey to a close. So within the National Signing Date period, again, right now we're in a really categorized prime time for it. Kyle, talk a little bit about that signing date period as we have it coming up here.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of put some numbers around it, first and foremost, every year more than 48,000 student athletes sign the National Letter of Intent during the NLI signing period. It's really become that National Signing Day has become a celebrated event for student athletes, families, and coaches, especially at the Division I level. You guys have seen it every year where a basketball player comes on, puts the cap on, or has a couple laid out in front of them and picks the one. So it's become a huge event, and I will probably talk about our own experiences with it here toward the end. But I floated it earlier. When is National Signing Day? Tomorrow, for most sports. All sports except for Division I basketball and D1 and D2 football, student athletes can begin signing their letters of intent for scholarships starting tomorrow, November 1st through August 1st of 2022. So tomorrow through August 1st of next year. The couple caveats we mentioned with like Division I basketball, their early period does start tomorrow as well. So basketball for Division I, they're able to start signing their National Letter of Intents tomorrow through the 17th. So they have about a 7-day period where they have an early signing period. That's how most sports used to be, but most sports have opened it up to a longer period of time where they can actually sign their National Letter of Intent. Division I and Division II football, which I talked about, their early signing period starts December 15th through the 17th, and they have a later one back further into the spring of their senior year as well. So you guys can check that out on our NLI signing dates. You can check all those out for all sports on our website. And while athletes can receive their NLI, they can receive the actual NLI papers before that signing date. They're not permitted to actually sign the date documents until National Signing Day. You can sign a national letter of intent after that last signing period. So technically speaking, you can sign after August 1st, but odds are there's probably not going to be much in the way of roster sponsor scholarships available at that time. So, probably a lot of people are wondering right now, Kyle, is it mandatory? Is the national letter of intent mandatory to sign? Phil, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So this is a really important step in the process, right? We get that national letter of intent, and the answer for the short side is no. Okay, the national letter of intent, the NLI, is not going to be something mandatory to sign. But especially in the event that we receive an NLI, it's really important that as a family, as a student athlete, you fully understand it. Okay, whether you decide to sign it or not, this is a legal contract, binding, and you want to make sure you have a full understanding so you can make the appropriate decision. And by description, by definition, the NLI, it is actually a 1-year agreement that is designed to protect both parties. Okay, a 1-year agreement when it comes to the student athlete to be protected as well as at college. Okay, really important. And not every college out there has an NLI. Okay, that's very important to note as well. But when we're looking at our Division I programs and our Division II programs, about 650 of those schools will utilize the NLI. So really important, we just have a little bit of research behind our belt. And if we were to receive that NLI based upon the different program we're targeting to play our college days, really important we have a full understanding, because once we do sign on that dotted line, it's a contract, it's legal, you're binded to it. So we got to make sure we have a full understanding of it. And I can maybe even reflect on my days going through this process. I know, Kyle, you can a bit as well. You get that contract and it's like, man, this is it's a big contract, a lot of verbiage behind it. Understand it. Make sure you know that stuff. Make sure you know it.
Absolutely. It's a contract, it's a legal document. So there could be some complexities to it. So you want to make sure you know what the fine print says. You want to know what all goes along with that. And I know going through my process, we talked about just the excitement around it. I was incredibly stressed around that time, but we can kind of break this down into what signing the NLI means. It really comes down to 3 important factors, what the national letter of intent means. One, it's your student has committed to 1 year at that university. They do not need to sign another NLI after their first year, but the school is required to let that student athlete know if their athletic scholarship is going to be renewed, or if there's going to be more money added to it, or what that looks like for the upcoming year. That's a conversation they have to have. The university, they're guaranteeing, they're promising to provide this athletic scholarship for that year. The NLI and financial aid package are 2 separate documents. So if we're talking about financial aid with like FAFSA, that's different from the athletic scholarship side of things. Your student athlete will need to sign both if you're going to be combining both. And last, the biggest thing I was just talking about this second ago, and it's a good time for Phil and I after this to talk about our own experiences. But this is your student athletes recruiting. It's their journey's over. No other schools can recruit them at this point. They can't be marketing themselves out to coaches anymore. It's very much a finite contract. It's very much stating, I am going to this school. This is my contract, committing to this school for the next year. Okay, that's really important to know before you sign that national letter of intent, that it's not something you can get out of. If there is some sort of situation, there's always extenuating circumstances, that can be that situation, but more often than not, it's going to be this year contract for the next year. So Phil, I know you mentioned it a second ago. Tell me a little bit about your own recruiting process, your own national letter of intent, the process leading up to that, what that day was like for you.
Absolutely. So again, what we're talking about is that time period where the hope is all our work is getting ready to pay off. Okay, our long recruiting journey that we've been on, it's getting ready to pay off once we get into this conversation. And when we look at my personal experience, I did receive a national letter of intent that I chose to not sign coming directly out of high school. And it wasn't because I was just, going over the contract and I knew exactly what was right and what was wrong. I wasn't a lawyer back then as a student athlete, but the programs that actually sent me an NLI, I decided to take more of a route where I can find more exposure. I can take more of a route where, I can delay things a little bit to get a greater potential scholarship offer. So amongst getting a national letter of intent for me, it came with a lot of excitement, right? It came with a lot of high school notoriety. It came with a lot of recognition. But in the long run, after reviewing that NLI, and I know we referred to it, you may get that NLI ahead of time, prior to signing day. I was one of those candidates. After long talks with my mother, long talks with my dad, long talks with the family, the best route for me was to not initially sign an NLI. And again, I found success in a further route by taking a junior college approach per se. Now, again, if I didn't know the obligation behind that NLI, it could have done me even worse off. The main thing, even though I didn't choose to sign it right away or sign it at all in that manner, was that I understood it. Okay, I understood that if I signed it right away, I would be obligated to commit to that program for at least 1 year versus exploring other opportunities. Because Kyle, as you just mentioned, once we sign on that dotted line, our recruiting process is over. Okay, there's no other schools that can potentially reach out to me with their own personal recruiting needs. So I wanted to be super sure before I signed that NLI, and I made that overall decision that it wasn't the right time for me at that particular time.
Yeah, it's a really important point that, that's why we put so much emphasis on finding the right fit. It's a contract that you don't want to end up finding yourself in the wrong situation, or a school that isn't a good fit for your program. It's not a good fit for your coach. It's not a good fit for you, whatever that may be. Every year, there are thousands of student athletes who end up transferring or trying to transfer. We see it in NCAA basketball all the time, that as soon as the transfer portal opens, there are hundreds of student athletes that enter that transfer portal trying to find a new program. And it is possible you are able to transfer after that first year, but it's not a great process. It's messy. It's difficult. It can be uncomfortable. It's much like the divorce of college sports. So much like marriage, you want to try and get it right on the first try. So I think that was smart for Phil to not go that route, open himself up to junior college, which allowed him to pursue some more opportunities. After that probably opened up more exposure, more schools that he might want to pursue. But the one thing to keep in mind, and this isn't going to be everybody's process, but signing an NLI does not automatically mean your student athlete has been admitted into that university. They still have to receive their amateur certification from the NCAA Eligibility Center. You still need to be eligible. You still need to get into school, hit all the admission requirements. Generally speaking, most schools' coaches, they're going to figure those things out before they even talk about scholarships, NLI. They're probably not going to go through that process if they don't think you're going to get into the school in the first place, but it is something to keep in mind. Cool. Phil, any other thoughts along the NLI lines?
Yeah, I think that really goes into the recruiting process as a whole, just that part you just mentioned there, Cal. And that's why we bake starting this process ahead of time. You can never start too early, although we're talking about seniors when they receive their NLI. That's why it's important to start this process early on to know what we need to do to fulfill the eligibility requirements amongst the NCAA. So we know what we have to fulfill when it comes to the admissions requirements for a particular college. Because again, academics and athletics are separate for a reason. And typically there's separate requirements. And you do not, as a student athlete, nor family, nor both, want to be all crystal clear with signing a dotted line as far as your NLI is concerned, and then be ineligible in another category. So this is the checks and balances. As senior year is concerned, it's supposed to be almost a victory lap. But if we haven't done that work ahead of time, we still got to put the research in to make sure we're crossing all the T's amongst the NLI, making sure we understand everything fully before we make a decision whether to sign or not. And then amongst the programs, the specific colleges that we are targeting or are in a communication with, or that we see ourselves at in the following year, we have to make sure everything is crystal clear amongst admissions as well as the NCAA amateurism status, just to make sure we can't get that last no when it's almost time to walk across stage and open up the new chapter in our life.
That's right. Crossing all the T's and dotting all the, dare I say, NLIs. So again, National Signing Day starts tomorrow, November 10th. It goes through August 1st of 2022 next year. That's for the vast majority of sports, D1 basketball, starts tomorrow as well. Early signing period finishes the 17th. D1 and D2 football, early signing period, not till later this year in December 15th through 17th. But this is what we're all driving toward. This is why we talk about it so early and often. The NLI, the commitment, signing, National Signing Day, for vast majority of student athletes, it doesn't happen. And for the vast majority of student athletes, it doesn't happen just by chance. It doesn't happen just by going out and playing and hoping coaches happen to find you. It takes outside work. It takes building an online presence, building up a profile, marketing yourself to college coaches, trying to find the right fit, trial and error. There's a lot of steps that go through this process to get to the National Signing Day, to get to signing an NLI. So this is the culmination of your process you're driving toward. This is what you can look forward to by putting in all that hard work throughout the recruiting process to be on the right track and achieve your goals of playing in college and having that on your resume for the rest of your life. No one can take that away from you. So great stuff so far, Phil. Let's turn to the questions. Again, if you guys have any questions about the NLI or about anything else, feel free to throw them in there. Looks like we have our first one up there. When do 2023s sign an NLI? Phil, this probably should be a pretty straightforward one. We're talking about the 2022s signing their NLI right now. So, Phil, we can probably take it the next step further in 2023s.
Yep, so absolutely. So within a year out, okay, again, consult our website to see specific periods amongst your senior year when those periods open up and you're able to sign the NLI. But within a year's time, again, this time in a year, you should be in the cars to start having those conversations at the very bare minimum when it comes to the date in which you be able to sign that national letter of intent.
Absolutely. Very, very straightforward. So next year, 2023 is right about the same time. Damien asks, are most NLI contract for seniors only, or can juniors be included too? So very similar question. Yeah, the NLI itself can only be signed in senior year. So starting tomorrow for seniors. That being said, that doesn't mean that student athletes can't receive scholarship offers before tomorrow of their senior year. You know, most people we're talking about who are going to be signing their NLIs starting tomorrow have already been having conversations with coaches for probably a year, maybe 2 years, maybe longer than that. Maybe some of them had gotten scholarship offers years ago as freshmen in high school. Like, we can talk about a sport like baseball, which was my sport, my background. There's almost 125 graduates right now. That's freshmen in high school who've already gotten scholarship offers and verbally committed to those schools they're going to be playing at. Does that mean 100% they're going to end up signing an NLI to that school? No, not necessarily, but they're probably going to be the top of the pack if they end up going anywhere else as well. So those are roster spots that we can assume are already filled for their 2025 class, but they will not be able to sign their NLI until their senior year. So when we talk about recruiting from the start of freshman year, most people think it's a 4-year process. It's really more like a 3.5-year process. And we're talking about the start of freshman year, because the expectation is that most student athletes are going to be done with the recruiting process by the start of their senior year. So that's why we talk about getting on this so early and being proactive very early on throughout the entire process, so that you're not going in your senior year trying to scramble and figure things out. But really good question. Cool. Wanda asks, what about Division III and the celebratory letter of intent? That's a really good question, Wanda. Phil, tell us about the Division III and kind of a little bit more of a not metaphorical, but just kind of a placeholder for an NLI.
Yeah. So looking at programs outside of Division II and Division I, they're typically going to have their own form of an NLI. Division III is going to have more, again, that celebratory feel where they'll send you some information over, they'll send you some documents over, and amongst your high school, you can still celebrate that within a certain time period that you're typically signing over to that program, but it won't be, again, the same NLI as what you would receive out of the 650 schools in Division I and Division II that hold it. But also with that in mind, other programs such as NAI and JUCO programs, they will have a different version of it. And it's super important that you just communicate with the college program and the coaches you should already be in communication with to determine if something actually needs to be signed contractually to make sure you can come to that program. But more of it is going to be more celebratory. Yeah,
it's a very good question. Division III schools, they're not necessarily mandated by the NCAA. They're not governed by the NCAA. Division threes are their own individual entities that kind of run their own program. They have their own requirements as far as academics goes. They have their own eligibility requirements. They don't have a formal NCAA national letter of intent, though some schools may have a Division three, like we talked about, celebratory letter of intent they sign to that school. But when we're talking about Division three, they do not have athletic scholarships. So it's going to be more based around merit-based scholarships and academic scholarships, but also still having conversations with those coaches to come play that sport at that school. So it's a little bit more of a unique process with a little less of an informal signing and letter of intent. A really good question for sure. Cool. Re-asked, what if the student athlete gets no offers before National Signing Day? Can they still be recruited? That's an incredibly important question. Phil, we probably are talking to how many student athletes right now or families right now that are seniors, they're 2022 graduates that are at that point where they have no scholarship offers.
Yes, so many, majority of them. And we look at signing day being tomorrow with no communication with college coaches prior. There's a high likelihood you won't be signing tomorrow, and you won't be signing as a senior in the early part of that signing period that extends again through August 1st. Now, are there opportunities still out there? Absolutely. Okay, absolutely. Student athletes all the time, number one, sign after the signing period. That's still a possibility, although roster spots are going to be more limited. But also just looking at the countless opportunities outside of scholarships, you can still pursue opportunities for walk-on spots for colleges outside of Division I and Division II. And one of the more rarities, every student athlete that gets an NLI during this time period, they're not all going to sign. Some will make that decision to not sign that NLI to that particular school for whatever given reason. Now, when that occurs, some college coaches are going to have unexpected roster spots that are open, and those still need to be filled. So there's a couple opportunities still to tackle. They're going to be more rare, and we need to be extremely open at this point. But the best thing you can do, especially as a senior right now who hasn't received the NLI or has limited contact with college coaches, is to make sure you're exposing yourself to those programs out there still looking to fill roster spots.
Yeah, for our seniors, it's just about being a little bit more open to travel, a little bit open to division level, considering D3, NAI, junior college. It's about being a little bit more open to opportunities right now, knowing that most schools are kind of filled up at this point. So it's not impossible. There absolutely are coaches in our network still looking for 2022s, but it's very much go time to get back caught up right now. So good question, Ree. Cool. Damien, it looked like Damien had another question. Do NLI contracts have time frame in which we'd need to sign by, or it becomes void? It's a really good question. You probably would have to communicate with that specific school, with the coaches there and their program. They maybe put a time frame on that per the NCAA. I don't believe that's the case. As we talked about, the time frame for all sports, but football, D1, D2 football, and D1 basketball is tomorrow through August 22nd of next year. So technically speaking, per the NCAA, you can sign any day within that time period. That being said, if I'm a college coach and I have a student athlete I've offered a scholarship to and sent the NLI to them, and they're not signing it today, tomorrow, or not tomorrow, or they're not signing it a week from tomorrow, they're not signing it a month from tomorrow, 6 months from tomorrow, I'm pretty worried at that point, and I'm scrambling to figure out other opportunities. So I would say most coaches are not going to let that sit. They're not going to wait around to see what happens. I can tell you firsthand, coaches can be aggressive when they want someone to kind of figure it out. They're going to be calling you every single day to see what the situation was with that. I can recall my senior year leading up to my signing period, which was only a week at that time, maybe a week and a half. I was on the phone with college coaches every single day with them trying to determine whether or not I was going to go to that school. So I had that figured out either before signing period started or a few days into signing period. I had that completely wrapped up, talking with a couple different coaches that I was talking to. So there's less urgency with the length of the period these days, but that being said, for coaches, they have to get it figured out. They know if they lose that person, that student athlete, they have to try and find someone else. So they're going to be, if they're offering you a scholarship, NLI, they're not going to wait around. They're going to get that figured out right away. A good question. Another really good question for you, David. Cool. Jennifer, longer question. So it's our understanding that D1 and 2 can't even express interest in a softball player until August 15th of their junior year. I hear you all talking about you should know a year or more in advance. I think I understand your question, Jennifer. I used to be a travel softball coach myself. My sister, who played Division I college softball, she's a Division II softball coach herself. So yeah, softball, lacrosse, women's lacrosse in general, they changed their rules a few years back about when contact can happen, when they can actually be communicating with student athletes. So they can still show interest. They can still view student athletes' profiles on our network. They can still open emails from student athletes with us. They can still follow student athletes in our network. They cannot have communication the same way they once did, where we see seventh graders getting scholarships and committing. But that being said, they can still, in one way or another, show that they have interest in a student athlete. I believe the contact date is June 15th for softball. I can recheck on that. I have the NCAA contact rules always pinned on my desk. I believe it's June 15th. So August 1st of junior year. So going into junior school year, August 1st, they can have any sort of contact, but most student athletes are going to know they're getting viewed, they're getting looked at, they're going to have a little bit more interest. So softball's a little bit unique. Phil, you can probably talk toward how that works with some of the other sports where they don't have quite as stringent of communication rules, like say a student athlete reaching out to a college coach.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to know when we talk about those rule changes for softball in particular, that was something that shook up the college coach community as well. Again, college coaches were recruiting softball athletes very early for a reason, because we typically see softball as a very competitive sport early on for those embarked in a sport. So college coaches were getting after it early. And when the NCAA put that stipulation in place saying, hey, you have to be a little bit more delayed within your communication, that did shake up the college coach community. So within that, college coaches are still very aggressive with underclassmen for softball, but more in strategic ways when they're really valuing or evaluating prospects, seeing what you're doing in a particular grade until they can reach out. And when that contact period does happen, when college coaches can actually communicate directly with you as a student athlete playing softball, they're not looking to just pull names out of a hat at that particular time. They're looking to follow up with their student athletes who, A, have already been proactive in following up with college coaches, even though coaches couldn't respond, or B, just student athletes that they've been watching for some time, but again, unable early on to communicate directly. So everything still leads up into it, but the only difference now with those softball student athletes is, again, the communication from a college coach to student athlete needs to be more delayed. But evaluation, I would say that still is the same at a very early point, far earlier than most other sports.
Yeah, one clarification I should add in there is that those rules apply to Division I schools where there can be no communication whatsoever. Those only apply to Division I softball coaches in schools. So a student athlete as a freshman or eighth grader or seventh grader, they can have a phone call with a Division II, Division III NAIA coach. If they pick up the phone, they call a college coach, that coach answers, they can have a conversation with that coach anytime. So that's something to keep in mind as well, is those rules are specifically for Division I schools. So there are some ways around it. And I definitely would recommend reaching out to Division II, Division III schools. My sister, again, talks about freshmen and sophomores that she's looking at and how they're so unprepared in the recruiting process because they thought they needed to wait till later to be working on this. So I think we have one more question and we'll wrap it up with some commitments here. Or maybe that was the last question. I think I messed up on that one. So we'll dive into the commitment section of our telecast here. It's always my favorite. So I think we're going to go straight to Phil with our first commitment for today.
Certainly my favorite as well there, Kyle. And again, these are athletes who have arrived for the most part, either getting ready to sign an NLI or really in that communication with college programs to get ready to do so. So we got Elizabeth here, a nickname. She goes by Eddie, just committed to Daytona State College, actually a junior college program. And a little bit of background about Elizabeth. You can brag on a ton of different things, but I like to brag on a work ethic. Eddie and family, they joined NCSA back in 2018. And again, aside from having a very thorough recruiting profile for college coaches to evaluate, when Eddie first joined, she was active right away. If we look at today, Eddie has over 1,000 logins into her profile, about 1,004 to be exact. And amongst those logins, when it came to uploading videos, stats, personal statements, just different things to keep college coaches up to date, that actually led Eddie to over 800 views from college coaches and over 100 direct follows from college coaches, keeping up with Eddie, seeing what's going on in the recruiting process. And when you look at an approach like Eddie, obviously Eddie found a home at Daytona State College, 2-year program, really good program. But Eddie has already been communicating with college coaches outside of Daytona, which is really impressive, to let further college coaches know that, hey, I'm going to Daytona, I just committed, but I'd actually be looking for another program in about 2 years. So definitely keep me on your radar. So just a really impressive approach there coming from Eddie, and glad she found her home and really excited to see what she's going to be doing in a couple of years.
Yep, awesome example of that junior college process and transferring into a 4-year school. So great stuff. Congrats, Eddie. Second commitment today is Johanna Rebello. She actually comes from Montreal, Quebec. Not exactly known for being a hotbed for water polo, as far as I know. And she's going to be going to McKendree University, which not exactly a direct pipeline to McKendree University here in Lebanon, Illinois, from Montreal, Quebec, as far as I know again. But just goes to show the power of NCSA and our network and the work that a student athlete can do to be successful in their recruiting. She started using NCSA back in October of 2019. We can see, if looking into her profile, she actually traded 50 emails with McKendree University through her NCSA profile directly. So was able to come from somewhere in Canada, Quebec, Canada, to a Division II program here in Illinois and have a ton of success in the recruiting process. So congrats to you, Johanna. Last one, we'll pass back over to you, Phil.
Very nice there coming from Johanna. And wrap things up, we got Robert here, and I don't really want to talk about Robert except for that amazing action shot there. No, but great stuff coming from Robert. Obviously, an amazing action shot, just looking like he's just sprawled out completely in the air. Robert just committed to the United States Naval Academy. Okay, a little bit of backstory about Robert. Same deal. Started back in 2018. Really effective in his recruiting process. Really proactive. Really taking the bulls by the horns when it comes to his personal recruiting. Robert, since 2018. Again, similar boat, has over 1,000 logins, about 1,050 logins into his recruiting profile, doing things like, again, updating stats, uploading video, keeping college coaches up to date, even since the underclassmen. And again, that has led to 253 views from college coaches and 118 direct follows from college coaches. So again, effort is paying off big time, obviously, from just all the work that Robert put into his profile, into his recruiting process, from the many college coaches that was checking Robert out amongst his NCSA profile online. But obviously, Robert has found his home. You're looking to go over to the United States Naval Academy, and couldn't be more happy there for Robert.
Awesome. Congrats again to all of our commitments here today. Thanks for joining me again, as always, Phil. Next week, we're going to be talking about total basketball domination, or maybe TBD, might be to be determined. So I'm trying to still figure that out. If it's up to me, it'll be total basketball domination. But again, reminder, tomorrow's the start of the national signing period for most sports. So it's a huge day for everybody. Congrats to everybody. We'll be signing tomorrow. If not, give us a call. We'll talk you through it and get you going on the right path. Phil, great to see you as always.
Absolutely. And we know this time around, me and you, when it came to that signing day period.
I'm telling you, it was last time, just because I feel like we talked about process. But anyway, neither here nor there. Great to see you again. I'll be back next week. So everybody have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.